Welcome to Hollywood, baby. Today we are making a fan favorite, oxtails. Every time I make oxtails, I always get so many compliments and everybody's always asking me for the recipe. So here it is. Let's get into it. Lights, camera, action.
Yeah, welcome to Hollywood. Everything is all good, laughing and relaxing in the fashion. We ain't passing on the action. Yeah, vacations, yeah, relations. Life is what you make it, where you really want to take it. Oh, life good. Oh, I'm getting to it. Oh, Hollywood. Oh, yeah, we in Hollywood.
Alright, so as I said before, we are going to be making oxtails today. Now, before I even get started, I know that everyone has a different style whenever it comes to oxtails. You're never really going to find two people who make them the exact same way. So this is my recipe. A lot of people love it, so I'm excited to share it with you. I promise you, if you follow this recipe, you will absolutely fall in love. I'm putting this out right before Thanksgiving, so I encourage you to try to make it for your family and see what they have to say about it, because I guarantee you it will be the favorite this holiday season. First and foremost, we want to make sure, obviously, my hands are clean. I always like to remove my jewelry. We're just going to rinse it off in cool water. There's obviously a lot of stuff that comes off of that meat after you soak it. These oxtails have been soaking in water, salt, lime juice, and apple cider vinegar just to make sure the meat is nice and clean. But I really just rinse off each and every piece to get in there nice and good. Make sure that the meat is super clean. Okay, so now that our meat is cleaned, it's time to chop up the vegetables. And fair warning, I am not a chef, and my culinary skills as it pertains to chopping are non-existent. But my vegetables are clean and I'm getting ready to show you how it's done. Okay, so fun fact, my line sister actually got me this cutting board. Super nice. Thanks, Jay. I use it all the time. I just have a handful of spring onions or green onions, scallions, whatever you want to refer to them as. I chop off the bottom part and discard that. Now with all of our vegetables, we're just going to be halving them pretty much. So, if you've got 3 whole ones, we're going to put half to one side, half to the other. One half is going to be used for our base. The other half is going to be used for season. So the portion that we're using for season, all we're going to do is just chop it up into small pieces. Granted, my chopping skills, like I said, they're not that good. Alright, so we have our chopped onions. So the portion that we're using for our paste is going to go into our blender off to the side. So all I'm going to do with these, I'm just going to half them and I'm just going to throw them in. Alright, we're going to do the same thing for all of our vegetables. So we've got an orange pepper, and all I'm going to do here, half it to the best of my ability, pull out the seeds and discard the seeds. For the portion that we're using for seasoning, we're going to chop that up in just a minute, but the other portion we're just going to break up for the base, and we're going to throw these in the blender and chop the seasoning pepper into little pieces. And I'm pretty much going to follow this pattern throughout. Same thing with our red pepper. I'm going to chop it in half. The portion that we're using for our paste, we're just going to rip it or cut it. You can cut it, but I just like to do it quick, into pieces, and I put that into the blender and then discard the seeds and chop it up. We're going to do the same exact thing with our green pepper and our onion. So it's really just the same pattern, using half of it for the paste, half of it for the seasoning, which you will see later. I use parsley and cilantro, and I always like to just chop off the stems, but at the end of the day, they don't taste too bad. But I'm going to chop those stems off. I'm going to throw half of it into our paste, into the blender for our paste, and the other half I'm going to chop up, but I'm gonna put these to the side and save them for later. So I'm just gonna chop that cilantro up, and I'm just gonna throw it into a little bowl, and I'll tell you what we're gonna do with that later. With our parsley, split it into two. Get rid of some of those stems. Throw half of it in for the paste. And the other half we're gonna keep with our chopped vegetables. And we have our tomato. We're gonna chop up that tomato and we're going to put that in with our cilantro. Seems like a weird combo, but it'll all come together in the end, I promise. Last but not least, we've got our ginger and garlic. So now with our garlic, I always like to use a lot of garlic. Now with my garlic, I always like to do what's called a garlic smash, or that's what I call it. I take the peeled garlic and I put it under a plate and I just put my weight on it and smash it before I chop it, because that always brings out the best flavor. I'm gonna throw half of it into our blender for our paste. The other half I'm going to bring to the side for our seasoning. With ginger, a lot of people peel it and they peel it with a spoon. Yeah, whenever I'm using ginger, I always keep the skin on. That's just a preference. For those who don't know about the trio, and this is in every single dish that I make, whether it's Caribbean, American, whatever, the trio: onion, ginger, and garlic. Okay, you have to have onion, ginger, and garlic with any meat dish that you do, because it tenderizes the meat, adds a beautiful flavor, and it's just, the dish is not complete without it. So I'm gonna use half that chopped ginger for the paste and the other half for our seasoning, which is now complete. So this is our beautiful garden of vegetables. We're gonna leave this to the side. Now here are our vegetables chopped up, those peppers, onion, garlic, ginger, all that good stuff, those herbs. Now what we're gonna add to this is just a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. We're just gonna add a little bit of that in there. Soy sauce. Extra virgin olive oil. Just a little bit, not too much, probably a tablespoon. And then very important, your whole allspice. A lot of Jamaican dishes and just Caribbean dishes in general call for allspice seasoning, and it does make a huge difference. So I just take a small handful, probably about that much, of my allspice berries, and I put them in there. And allspice is a combination of many different seasonings. It's basically a nice flavorful punch all packed into one berry. It's definitely a necessity for any type of Caribbean dish you might ever make. And lastly, I can't find my measuring cup, but just a little bit of water, about a cup, to help break down these veggies. And we're going to put it into our blender. All right, so I'm gonna use the NutriBullet blender to blend up my veggies. I absolutely love the NutriBullet. I don't know what Ainsley did to the top to it, so be a little ratchet using a plate, so hopefully this goes well. And now at this point, the last thing I like to add is this browning seasoning. So it adds some nice color into that sauce and into the meat. Alright, so now it's time to season up our oxtails. I always start by adding just a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. Now, I kind of alluded to this before, but I do not measure stuff out. The good thing about seasoning a dish like this is that it's pretty hard to make a mistake. I always use a lot of seasoning because that's really how you pack that flavor in. My favorite seasoning is this Badia Adobo Complete Seasoning. It is so good. I always use a whole bunch of this. Now, I put that olive oil on before because it just helps to spread those seasonings out, but I always use a ton of this in everything. I put it in my vegetables, my chicken. It doesn't really matter. It's always good. It's good on everything. I put it in rice. I also use the Sazon by Badia. I like to use a lot of this as well. Packs in a lot of flavor. And I feel like seasoning is where you can really get creative. It's like a painter choosing their paint colors. Like it's just, you know, you can really have fun with it, dress it up. I use a little bit of oregano in there. Just a little. I don't have any black pepper, which is a strange thing not to have, but I do have white pepper. Well, I'm just gonna put a little bit of that in, but normal black pepper is fine. Now, your adobo, this is like a staple. You have to use this on everything. I love it because the picture has vegetables, meat, fish, all that, and it's so true. You can literally use it on everything. And when it comes to this, I mean, I just pretty much bathe the meat in it because you cannot have too much adobo. If you don't go through at least 3 cans of adobo in a year, then you're not seasoning your food right, okay? What you laughing at, Ainsley? So, I mean, I'm about to use half a can right now. You see that? Your oxtail seasoning. Now, this is something I just started using more recently, but it's good. Do a lot of shakes on there. Another staple on any Caribbean dish is thyme. You've got to use a lot of thyme. Now, I told you guys before I would usually use the fresh thyme, but you know, this gets the job done as well. A little bit of paprika. Now it's time to get in there with those hands. You want to make sure each and every piece is well loved, well massaged. Once we've massaged our meat, it's time to add in our vegetables that we had set to the side earlier. All that parsley, all that good flavor. And then we also add in our blended mixture. Okay, so we're just going to pour that in over our meat. So it's more like a sauce than a paste. All of this good flavor, all of this good color. From there, we're just going to cover this mixture, put it in the fridge and leave it at least an hour or 2. If you can marinate it overnight, if you have that time, I mean, the longer you can marinate it, the better. But I've also made oxtails without marinating them before, and they've come out just as good. So now that our oxtails have been marinated, it is time to brown them. So when it comes time to brown, I get the pot nice and hot. Now I put some olive oil in there, just enough to kind of cover and layer that pan. My stovetop is on relatively high heat. Now, what I do is after it's on high heat, I bring it down to a medium and I put in, I know it sounds strange, but bear with me, some brown sugar. About 3 handfuls of brown sugar. So once we add our brown sugar, I'm really just going to let that caramelize. It's not going to give you a sweet taste, so don't be too concerned with that. But I'm going to keep it on high heat and get that sugar nice and brown. And while that's going, I'm getting ready to add in, ideally you want to use a Scotch Bonnet Pepper, but a lot of grocery stores in the US don't sell them. So I use habanero pepper, which gives it a similar heat. It's actually a cousin to the Scotch Bonnet. I normally freeze mine so that they stay good, and then I just throw them in. Woo! Nice and hot. Turn that down just a little bit to a medium heat. Now mind you, these peppers are very hot, so if you don't like spicy stuff, then I would not suggest using it. But I like the kick that it gives it. I start off by just browning it in there, and then later we're going to cut it open so that those flavors can really get into the meat. But before that, we're going to go ahead and add in our oxtail. And go ahead and add in our oxtail. As we're adding in that oxtail, you really want to avoid getting the vegetables in there just because you don't want them to burn. But we're just going to rub them around into that brown sugar oil mixture. Fry them up nice and good, or brown them up nice and good. The goal here is not to cook them all the way through. We're just getting our meat nice and brown so that it has a good crust on it. And then that Scotch Bonnet Pepper is going to kick in to give it a little bit of heat. Allow it to peek through just a little bit. So we're just gonna let that go. I do about 3 minutes each side, and then I go in there and I rotate those oxtails around. I can't really fit all of the oxtails in my pan, so I just do it in 2 separate batches, which gets the job done. All right, and I'm gonna get that plate, and I'm just going to put them onto the plate. You can already start to see these oxtails getting nice and brown. A really nice color. Okay, so now we're just going to remove this from the heat. And now it's time to add in our large pot. So in our large pot, what we're going to do, we're going to put that on medium heat. I'm going to pour in all of the goodness from the first pan. All that goodness, so that caramelized brown sugar with those vegetables, a little bit of vegetables and the juice from the meat, all of that is going to go in. After that, we're going to use the remaining vegetables and juices and stuff that we used to originally marinate our meat. We're just going to pour all of that in. And don't worry, it's going to cook. It's going to add in all of that flavor. And we're going to add in those brown oxtails. Already it's smelling so good. It's looking so good. We're just going to stir those in. You really want to try your best to get the meat down to the bottom of the pan as much as possible. Are going to have to use a fairly large pot for this. After we've stirred that up nice and good, I'm going to add in 3 cups of water. You really want for your water to just be nice and even with your meat. Also going to add in just a little bit more of this oxtail seasoning. Just enough to cover the top. Now another little thing that I like to do is add in just a little bit of this Beefy Onion Lipton flavor, which you can also use beef stock. Replace some of your water with beef stock or beef broth, but it just adds a nice beefy flavor. And I just do a couple of shakes of that. So not even a quarter of a packet, just a couple of shakes. Now, a lot of you guys are going to think this is crazy, but ketchup is used in a lot of Caribbean dishes. Now, this I normally do measure out just a tablespoon. But you're going to stir that in there nice and good. But at this point, we're going to bring our pot up to a boil. We're going to cover it and let it simmer for about 30 minutes. Okay, so it's been about 35 minutes. And all we're going to do is just give this a little bit of a stir. And we're really just going to continue to allow it to simmer for another couple hours. We are right at the 3-hour mark. This has been simmering for about 3 hours on medium low. And right now our oxtails are extremely tender. You can feel that they're soft to the touch. Smells amazing in here. I wish y'all could actually smell it. At this time I'm getting ready to add in some tomato paste. I'm just gonna go ahead and add in 6 ounces. Alright, so I added in that tomato paste. I'm gonna stir it to help break that down. It's going to thicken up our gravy just a little bit. And now, I'm sure you guys probably forgot, but those tomatoes and that cilantro that we chopped up earlier, we're gonna go ahead and add that in because we've only got a little bit of time left. So our meat is extremely tender. This is a very good time to do a taste test to taste that gravy. It's the perfect amount of sweet, savory, and spicy. And this is also where you'll just pick up your oxtail and you'll check it for tenderness. You'll see that this is perfectly tender. It's just falling right off of the bone, so you can see that. I'm just gonna let this go for another 3 minutes just to melt down that tomato paste, and then it is ready to serve. Here is the moment of truth.
Time to test these things
Let's see
out.
what Ainsley thinks about them. He did not help. He just put on his
I have a West Indian
apron.
background, so.
Hold on, wait. Do that fork thing again so we can do the little fork thing again so we can see that.
Yeah, see that.
Look at that.
Right,
you don't even need a knife. All right.
You gotta get some meat, gotta get some fat, gotta get some sauce.
Let's see what Ainsley thinks about this.
Gotta get some rice. We got a rice right here, but.
All right, let's see what he thinks. Here we go.
Wow. Wow. I know y'all at home jealous right now. And I really do feel bad for you because these right here, it's as good as it gets. This is as good as it gets. These are some good cockers. These are some good, very good oxtails.